The lights in the room were too bright. Veltar Kos kept his eyes closed most of the time, but the humans needed the light to see him clearly. His thick gray skin looked darker under the white lights. Scars covered his arms and chest. Some were old, from battles long before he met humans. Others were new, still pink and rough. Admiral Goon sat across from him at a metal table. The human was smaller than Veltar, like all humans were, but Veltar did not feel bigger or stronger anymore. The war had changed that feeling forever. "Tell me about the first attack," Admiral Goon said. His voice was calm and quiet. "Tell me about New Busan." Veltar opened his eyes. They were yellow, like most of his people, but now they looked tired and old. He was only 30 years old by Velkari counting, which was still young. But the war had aged him. "You want to know why we lost," Veltar said. The translation device around his neck changed his words into human language. "You want to know how 50,000 warriors became less than 900? Dr. Mira Kim sat beside Admiral Goon. She was writing notes on a tablet. She looked up when Veltar spoke. Her eyes were kind, but Veltar could see she was afraid of him. Most humans were afraid of the Velkari. They were right to be afraid. "We want to understand," Dr. Kim said. "We want to help both our people heal from this war." Veltar made a sound like laughing, but it was not happy. "Heal? Doctor, some wounds never heal. Some things cannot be forgotten." He stood up from his chair. Even sitting, he was taller than the humans. Standing, he was almost twice their height. His body was covered in natural armor, thick plates that grew from his skin, but the armor had cracks now, deep cuts that would never fully close. "I will tell you about New Busan," Veltar said, "but you will not like what you hear." Admiral Goon nodded. "We need to know." Veltar walked to the window. Outside, space was black and full of stars. Somewhere out there was his home world. Somewhere else was Earth. Both planets were scarred by war now. "We thought you were weak," Veltar began. "The report said humans had just learned to travel between stars. You had small ships, simple weapons. Your people lived on only a few worlds." He turned back to face the humans. "My people have fought wars for 1,000 years. We have conquered 50 worlds. We are born to fight. Our bodies are natural armor. Our strength is 10 times yours. Our weapons can burn through metal." Dr. Kim kept writing. Admiral Goon listened without moving. "The commanders told us this would be easy," Veltar continued. "They said we would land on your worlds and you would surrender. Maybe some of you would fight, but not for long. Not against us." Veltar sat back down. The chair was too small for him, made for humans. Everything in this ship was made for humans. It made him feel strange, being in a place built by the people he had tried to kill. "I was a squad leader in the 7th Assault Legion," he said. "I had 20 warriors under my command. Good fighters, strong, smart. We had fought together for years." "What was your mission?" Admiral Goon asked. "Simple. Land on New Busan, take the spaceport. Kill anyone who fought back. Wait for the humans to surrender." Veltar looked at his hands. They were shaking a little. They had been shaking since the war ended. "How many humans lived on New Busan?" Dr. Kim asked. 2 million, Veltar said. "Men, women, children, families. We knew they would have some soldiers, but not many. Maybe a few thousand with basic training." Admiral Goon leaned forward. "What happened when you landed?" Veltar was quiet for a long time. He was remembering things he tried not to think about. At first, it was what we expected. We came down in dropships, big metal boxes that fell from the sky. Our ships hit the ground near the spaceport. We jumped out, ready to fight, and nothing. No one was there. The spaceport was empty. The buildings were quiet. We thought maybe the humans had run away. Veltar rubbed his forehead. We were wrong. They were there, watching, waiting, learning how we moved, how we fought. What did they do? First, they hit our ships. Not with weapons we understood. They used explosives, but not normal ones. They had mixed chemicals from farms and factories. Things that should not be weapons, but they made them into weapons. Dr. Kim stopped writing. Improvised explosives? Yes, but not just bombs. They were smart about it. They waited until half of us were out of the ships. Then they blew up the engines, trapped some of us inside, trapped some of us outside. Admiral Goon nodded slowly. Divide and conquer. Then they came at us from everywhere. Not like soldiers. Not in lines or groups. They came from sewers, from rooftops, from holes in the ground. Children threw bottles filled with fire. Old people shot at us from windows. Women used farming tools as weapons. Veltar's voice got quieter. We killed many of them. Our weapons were better. Our armor was stronger, but they kept coming. And every time we killed one, two more appeared. How long did the fighting last? 3 days. 3 days to take one spaceport. The commanders had said it would take 3 hours. Dr. Kim looked up from her tablet. What changed your mind about humans? Veltar met her eyes. Your Admiral Goon asked me to explain why a legion of 50,000 seasoned warriors was reduced to 847 survivors. The answer terrifies me more than the humans themselves. He paused, remembering. We never understood what we were fighting. The room was quiet except for the sound of air moving through the vents. Admiral Goon and Dr. Kim waited for him to continue. We fought like we always fought. Honor formation rules. You fought like... Veltar searched for the right words. Like dying was just another weapon. Like pain was just another tool. Like every single human life was worth 10 Velkari lives and you would spend them all to prove it. He stood up again, walking back to the window. That was just the first battle, Veltar said. Just the beginning. We thought New Busan would teach us how to fight humans. Instead, it taught us that we had no idea what we were fighting against. Admiral Goon cleared his throat. Will you tell us about the rest? Veltar nodded, but he did not turn around. Yes, but first you must understand something. What happened after New Busan was worse. Much worse. And by the end we realized the truth. What truth? That humans do not fight wars to win them. You fight wars to make sure no one wants to fight you ever again. Veltar sat back down at the metal table. His large hands rested flat on the surface, still trembling slightly. Admiral Goon and Dr. Kim waited for him to continue his story. The alien warrior took a deep breath before speaking again. After we took the spaceport, we thought the hard part was over, Veltar said. We had lost many warriors, but we controlled the most important place on New Busan. Ships could land. More troops could come down. He looked at Admiral Goon. Your Colonel Han was in charge of the human defenders. We found this out later. At first, we did not know who was leading them. What did you know about Colonel Han? Dr. Kim asked. Only that he was making us look like fools. Veltar's voice got harder. Every move we made, he was ready for it. Every plan we had, he had a better one. Veltar stood up and walked around the small room. His footsteps were heavy on the metal floor. The second day, we tried to take the city center. It was only 2 miles from the spaceport. Should have been easy. What happened? We sent 500 warriors in armored vehicles. Big, strong machines that could drive through buildings. Our weapons could destroy anything in our path. Veltar stopped walking. We never made it past the first mile. Admiral Goon leaned forward. What stopped you? Everything. Veltar turned to face them. The roads were gone, blown up. Not just broken, but completely destroyed. We had to go around through smaller streets. Then what? The smaller streets were traps. Buildings fell on us, not from bombs, but from careful planning. They had cut through support beams days before. When our vehicles drove past, the buildings came down. Dr. Kim looked up from her notes. How many did you lose? 50 warriors in the first hour. But that was not the worst part. Veltar sat back down. The worst part was how they fought back. Explain. We had night vision. We could see in the dark better than humans. So they turned off all the lights in the city. Made it completely black. We thought this would help us, Veltar rubbed his eyes. But they knew their city. Every street, every building, every hiding place. They moved through the darkness like they were part of it. Guerrilla warfare, Admiral Goon said quietly. Yes, but more than that. They used our strengths against us. We were bigger and stronger, so they made spaces too small for us to move easily. We had better weapons, so they got close enough that we could not use them without hitting our own people. Veltar's voice got quieter. I saw a human child that day. A boy named Kai. He was maybe 19 years old. Young even for humans. What did he do? My squad had him trapped in a building. There was no way out. 6 of us, 1 of him. He was wounded, bleeding from his arm. His weapon was almost out of power. Veltar closed his eyes, remembering. We told him to surrender. Most species would surrender when trapped like that. But he looked at us and smiled. He smiled? Yes, like he knew something we did not. Then he did something I have never seen before. He cut his own arm with a piece of metal. Used his blood to short out one of our plasma rifles. Dr. Kim stopped writing. He used his own blood? The blood got into the weapon's energy system. Made it overload. But that was not all. While the weapon was sparking and breaking, he pulled out a small explosive. Something he had made from cleaning chemicals and metal scraps. Veltar opened his eyes and looked at Admiral Goon. He held that bomb against his chest and detonated it, killed himself and 6 of my warriors. The room was quiet for a moment. Finally, Admiral Goon spoke. Why did that surprise you so much? Because it made no sense, Veltar said. In every war my people have fought, soldiers try to stay alive. They fight to win, but they also fight to go home. This human boy fought to make sure we could not go home. What happened next? We started seeing more of the same thing. Humans who fought like their own lives meant nothing, but it was not just soldiers. It was everyone. Veltar stood up again, pacing. There was a human woman, Sergeant So-Jin. She was in charge of defending a bridge. Just one bridge, but we needed it to move our heavy equipment. How many troops did she have? 10. We sent 200 warriors to take that bridge. Veltar shook his head. She held us off for 6 hours. How? She was smart. Very smart. She had turned the bridge into a trap. Explosives everywhere, but not just random bombs. She had studied how we moved, how we attacked. Every explosive was placed exactly where our troops would be. Dr. Kim looked up. What happened to her squad? They died in the first 2 hours. All of them. But So-Jin kept fighting alone. She had set up automatic weapons that fired even when she was not there. Remote explosives she could trigger from hiding spots. Veltar sat down heavily. We finally broke through her defenses. Found her position at the end of the bridge. But when we got there, she was already dead. How long had she been dead? 2 hours. She had been dead for 2 hours. But her weapons kept firing. Her traps kept killing my warriors. She had programmed everything to work without her. Admiral Goon was quiet for a moment. She knew she was going to die. Yes, but she made sure her death would keep costing us. Even after her heart stopped, she was still fighting. Dr. Kim put down her tablet. How did this affect your soldiers? It scared them. My people are brave, but we fight to live. We fight for honor, for our families, for our world, but we expect to survive. Veltar looked at his hands. Humans fought like survival was not important. Like winning was the only thing that mattered. What did your commanders think? At first, they said humans were just desperate, that when we killed enough of them, the rest would surrender. But as the days went on, we realized something terrible. What? This was not desperation. This was how humans always fought. We found books in the city. History books about human wars. They had been fighting each other for thousands of years, and they always fought this way. Veltar stood up and walked to the window again. We learned that humans had fought wars where millions died. Wars that lasted years. Wars where entire cities were destroyed, but humans kept fighting. What was the worst thing you learned? That humans had weapons that could destroy their entire world. Weapons so powerful they could kill every living thing on their planet. But instead of using them to conquer other humans, they made rules about not using them. Dr. Kim frowned. Nuclear weapons? Yes, we could not understand it. If you have weapons that can destroy everything, why not use them to win quickly? Why make rules that make war harder? Admiral Goon answered quietly. Because we learned that some victories cost too much. Veltar turned around. That was what scared us most. Humans had learned to limit themselves in war. Not because you were weak, but because you were too good at it. You had to make rules to stop yourselves from destroying everything. How did this change your tactics? We stopped trying to fight like we always had. We called for more troops, better weapons, stronger armor, but it did not help. Why not? Because every time we got better, humans got better too. They took our weapons and made them work better. They studied our armor and found weak spots we did not know existed. They learned faster than we could adapt. Veltar sat back down at the table. By the end of the first week, we had lost 3,000 warriors. The commanders said it was acceptable losses. But I knew better. What did you know? I knew we were not fighting an army. We were not even fighting a planet. We were fighting a species that had spent thousands of years learning how to kill things that were bigger, stronger, and better armed than they were. Dr. Kim picked up her tablet again. What happened next? The humans disappeared. Veltar's voice got very quiet. One day we were fighting them in the streets. The next day they were gone. No bodies, no prisoners, no trace. Just empty buildings and silence. Where did they go? Everywhere and nowhere. They had become invisible, and that was when the real war began. The silence in the room felt heavy. Veltar stared at the table, his yellow eyes distant and unfocused. Admiral Goon and Dr. Kim waited, knowing that what came next would be even harder to hear. When the humans disappeared, we thought we had won, Veltar finally said. The streets were empty. The buildings were quiet. Our commanders declared New Busan under our control. He laughed, but it was not a happy sound. We were fools. What happened? Dr. Kim asked. For 3 days, nothing. We set up camps in the city center. We posted guards. We sent patrols through the empty streets. Everything seemed normal. Veltar looked up at them. Then warriors started disappearing. How many? 1 or 2 each day at first. Guards who did not report in. Patrol units that never came back. We found their bodies later, if we found them at all. Admiral Goon leaned forward. How were they killed? Different ways. Some were shot with our own weapons. Some were killed with human knives. Others... Veltar paused. Others were killed with things that should not be weapons. Kitchen tools. Farming equipment. Pieces of broken glass. Where were the humans hiding? Everywhere. Under the city in tunnels we did not know existed. In buildings that looked empty but had hidden rooms. Some were living in the walls themselves. Dr. Kim made notes on her tablet. How did they survive without supplies? They had been planning this for weeks before we arrived. Food hidden all over the city. Water systems we could not find. Medicine stored in secret places. Veltar shook his head. But the worst part was not how they survived. It was how they watched us. What do you mean? Every move we made, they knew about it before we did it. Every plan we had, they were ready for it. They had cameras hidden everywhere. People watching from places we could not see. Veltar stood up and began pacing again. We found out later that they had put listening devices in our own equipment. While we were fighting in the first week, human engineers were stealing our technology and copying it. They reverse-engineered your weapons? Worse than that. They made our weapons work better. They took our plasma rifles and made them more powerful. They took our armor and found ways to break it. They studied everything about us and used it against us. Admiral Goon was quiet for a moment. Tell us about Captain Dal. Veltar stopped pacing. His whole body went still. How do you know about Captain Dal? He was mentioned in some of our reports. Captain Dal was... Veltar sat down heavily. He was the human who broke General Noxtal. Tell us what happened. General Noxtal was our supreme commander. He had fought in 12 wars across 20 planets. He was the smartest, strongest leader in the Velkari military. Nothing scared him. Dr. Kim looked up from her notes. What did Captain Dal do? At first, we did not even know he existed. Attacks just happened. Our supply convoys were destroyed. Our communication systems failed. Our weapons stopped working at the worst possible moments. But that was just the beginning? Yes, then we started finding messages. Written in our own language, left in places only we should have been able to reach. Inside our command ship. In General Noxtal's private quarters. On his personal computer. Veltar's voice got quieter. The messages were simple. Just 3 words over and over. We know you. Written in perfect Velkari script. How did that affect the general? He became paranoid. Started checking every room 3 times before entering. Had his food tested for poison. Wore his armor even when sleeping. Veltar rubbed his forehead. But the messages kept appearing. Where? Everywhere. On his mirror when he woke up. On his command screens during battle briefings. Even carved into the walls of his ship while we were in space. Millions of miles from any human planet. Admiral Goon frowned. How was that possible? We never found out. But the worst message came on the day General Noxtal broke. Veltar closed his eyes. It was written on his pillow in his locked room while guards stood outside his door. It said, "We know where you sleep." What did the general do? He called an emergency meeting with all his commanders. Told us the war was over. Said we had to leave New Busan immediately. Dr. Kim stopped writing. Just because of some messages? You do not understand, Veltar said. General Noxtal had fought enemies who could move through walls. Who could become invisible. Who could read minds. But none of them had ever gotten into his personal quarters without being detected. What made Captain Dal different? He was not just fighting a war. He was fighting our minds, making us afraid to sleep, afraid to eat, afraid to trust our own security. Veltar opened his eyes. The messages proved that nowhere was safe. Not our ships, not our armor, not our locked rooms. If humans could reach us there, they could reach us anywhere. Did you ever see Captain Dal? Once, just once. Veltar's voice became very quiet. It was during the evacuation. I was loading wounded warriors onto a transport ship. I turned around and there was a human standing 20 feet away. What did he look like? Small like all humans. Dark hair, calm eyes. He was not armed, not wearing armor, just standing there watching us leave. What did you do? I raised my weapon to shoot him, but then he smiled and pointed up at the sky. Veltar looked at Admiral Goon. There were 30 human ships above us, ships we had not detected, ships that could have destroyed our entire evacuation fleet. But they did not attack? No, Captain Dal just stood there until we were gone. Then he disappeared again. Veltar shook his head. Later, we found out that those ships had been there for days, watching us, waiting. Dr. Kim put down her tablet. Waiting for what? For us to leave. The humans did not want to destroy us. They wanted to scare us so badly that we would never come back. Did it work? General Noxtal took his own life 3 days after. We left New Busan. He could not live with the knowledge that humans had shown him mercy when they could have killed him. The room was quiet except for the sound of air moving through the vents. Finally, Admiral Goon spoke. Why did that scare him so much? Because it meant humans were not just better fighters. They were better strategists. They could have won the war in days, but instead they chose to win it in a way that would prevent future wars. How? By proving that fighting humans was not worth the cost. Not because you would lose warriors, but because you would lose your mind. Veltar looked at his hands. After New Busan, every Velkari commander knew the truth. What truth? That humans do not just fight to win. They fight to make sure their enemies never want to fight them again. And they are very, very good at it. Dr. Kim picked up her tablet again. What happened after you left New Busan? We regrouped on our command ship. The military leaders decided that New Busan was a special case. Maybe humans there were particularly well trained. Maybe they had better weapons than we expected. So you attacked another human colony? Yes, Terra Nova. 2 million humans, just like New Busan. But this time we brought 15,000 warriors instead of 5,000. Better weapons. Stronger armor. More ships. Veltar stood up and walked to the window again. We thought we had learned from our mistakes. Had you? No, we had learned nothing at all. Terra Nova was worse than New Busan, much worse. Why? Because by the time we attacked Terra Nova, every human in the galaxy knew how to fight us. They had studied the battle recordings from New Busan. They knew exactly what we would do and exactly how to stop us. Admiral Goon was quiet for a moment. What happened at Terra Nova? The siege lasted 3 months. 3 months to take one city from a species we thought was primitive. Veltar turned around. By the end, we realized something that changed everything. What? Humans were not just good at fighting. You were good at surviving, and you had been practicing survival for thousands of years before you ever met us. Veltar moved away from the window and sat back down at the table. His large frame seemed to sag with the weight of memories. Admiral Goon and Dr. Kim could see the exhaustion in his yellow eyes, but they needed to hear the rest of his story. Terra Nova was supposed to be different, Veltar began. We had more warriors, better ships, and stronger weapons. The commanders were sure we would win quickly. What was your plan? Admiral Goon asked. Simple. Surround the city. Cut off all supply lines. Wait for the humans to run out of food and water. Then they would have to surrender. Dr. Kim looked up from her tablet. How long did you expect the siege to last? 2 weeks. Maybe 3 at most. Humans needed food and water just like any other species. Without supplies coming from outside, they would starve. Veltar rubbed his face with his large hands. We were wrong about everything. What happened? The first month, nothing. We surrounded Terra Nova completely. No ships could land. No vehicles could get through our lines. We monitored all radio signals to make sure no messages were getting out. But the humans did not surrender. No, they kept fighting. Not just the soldiers, but everyone. Children, old people, workers who had never held weapons before. They all became fighters. Veltar stood up and began pacing again. But that was not the strangest part. The strangest part was that they did not seem to be starving. How was that possible? We found out later. While we were setting up our siege lines, humans were digging tunnels everywhere under the city, not just for hiding, but for growing food. Admiral Goon frowned. Underground farms? Yes. They had taken all the soil from parks and gardens and moved it into subway tunnels and old sewers. They were growing vegetables in complete darkness using lights powered by geothermal energy. They had planned for a siege? More than planned. They had practiced. We found records showing that Terra Nova had been preparing for exactly this kind of attack for months before we arrived. Dr. Kim stopped writing. How did they know you were coming? They did not know we specifically were coming. But they knew someone would come eventually. Humans always expect the worst to happen, so they prepare for it. Veltar sat back down. But the farming was just the beginning. They had also been training. Training for what? Everything. We saw 12-year-old children who could field strip our weapons and put them back together. We saw grandmothers who knew exactly where to place explosives to bring down buildings. We saw ordinary workers who could make deadly poison from household chemicals. How was that possible? Because humans study war like other species study art or music. Even when you are not fighting, you are learning how to fight better. You make movies about war, you write books about war, you play games about war. Veltar's voice got harder. We found a human child during the siege. A girl named Young. She was 16 years old, maybe 17. She had destroyed one of our dropships by herself. How? She used a technique her grandfather had taught her. A technique from a human war that happened 50 years before she was born. Her grandfather learned it from his grandfather, who learned it from his grandfather. Dr. Kim looked confused. Humans pass down military knowledge through families. Yes, not just knowledge, but stories. Every human family has stories about wars, about ancestors who fought and died and won. You learn tactics the way other species learn songs. What happened to the girl? We captured her after she destroyed our ship, brought her to our command post for questioning. The interrogator asked her why she had attacked us. Veltar paused, remembering. She looked confused by the question. Said it was obvious. We were invading her home, so she had to fight. She could not understand why we thought that was strange. Did she seem afraid? No, that was what scared us most. She was not afraid of us, even though we were twice her size and covered in armor. She was just angry that we had interrupted her studies. Admiral Goon leaned forward. Her studies? She was in school learning to be a doctor. She wanted to help people, to heal them. But when we invaded, she put aside her medical books and picked up weapons. What did that tell you about humans? That you do not have separate castes for warriors and healers like most species do. Any human can become a soldier if they need to. Any human can learn to kill if their family is threatened. Veltar stood up again, walking to the corner of the room. But Young was not the worst example. That was Elder Joe. Tell us about Elder Joe. She was 73 years old, could barely walk without help. Her hands shook from old age. Most species would have sent someone like her to safety far from the fighting. But not humans. Elder Joe asked to be assigned to defensive positions. Said she was too old to run, so she might as well be useful. Veltar turned around. We did not take her seriously. How dangerous could one old woman be? What did she do? She killed 23 of my warriors using kitchen knives and cleaning chemicals. 23 trained soldiers killed by a woman who needed help climbing stairs. Dr. Kim put down her tablet. How? Patience and planning? She watched our patrol routes for weeks, learning our habits. Then she set traps using things she found in abandoned restaurants and grocery stores. What kind of traps? Simple ones. Slippery floors that made us fall. Poisoned food that looked safe to eat. Doors that locked behind us, trapping us in rooms where she had filled the air with toxic gas. Veltar sat back down at the table. But the worst part was not how she killed us. It was how she learned to do it. What do you mean? After we captured the area where she had been hiding, we found her collection of human war documentaries. Hundreds of hours of film showing how humans had fought in previous wars. She learned tactics from movies. Yes, she had studied every major human conflict for the past 2 centuries. She knew more about military strategy than some of our commanders, and she had learned it all from entertainment programs. Admiral Goon was quiet for a moment. What did that tell you about human culture? That war is so important to humans that you turn it into art. You study your own violence like other species study philosophy. You remember every battle, every tactic, every mistake. And that knowledge gets passed down to everyone. Not just soldiers, but civilians. Children learn about war in school. Adults watch war movies for fun. Elderly people remember wars from their youth and teach the lessons to their grandchildren. Dr. Kim picked up her tablet again. How did this affect your siege? We realized that we were not just fighting the humans in Terra Nova. We were fighting thousands of years of human military knowledge. Every tactic we tried, some human somewhere had seen before and knew how to counter. What did your commanders decide to do? They ordered us to take the city by force. No more siege, no more waiting. Direct assault with everything we had. What happened? Disaster. The humans had turned every building into a fortress. Every street into a killing ground. Every room into a trap. Veltar's voice got quieter. We lost 8,000 warriors in 3 days. 3 days of fighting that accomplished nothing except proving that humans could kill us faster than we could kill them. How was that possible? Because they had advantages we did not understand. They knew the city better than we did. They had prepared for months. And most importantly, they were not trying to survive the battle. What do you mean? Velkari warriors fight to win and go home. Human defenders fought to make sure that even if they died, we would pay such a high price that other humans would have time to prepare for us. Veltar looked at Admiral Goon. That was when we learned the most terrifying thing about humans. What? You do not fight wars to win them quickly. You fight wars to make them so expensive that your enemies will not want to fight another one. Is that why the siege failed? The siege failed because we finally understood what we were really fighting. Not just an army, not just a planet, but a species that had turned survival into an art form. Dr. Kim looked up. What do you mean? Humans had survived ice ages that killed most life on your planet. You had survived diseases that should have wiped out your entire species. You had survived wars between your own people that lasted for decades. So when we invaded, you just treated us like another survival challenge. Another test that your species had to pass. And you had been practicing for that test for thousands of years. The room was quiet for a long moment. Finally, Admiral Goon spoke. What happened next? The evacuation order came. We had to leave Terra Nova just like we left New Busan. Veltar looked at his hands. But this time the humans did not just watch us go. What did they do? They followed us. And that was when we learned that the war was not over. It was just beginning. The room felt colder now. Veltar sat hunched over the table, his massive frame looking smaller somehow. Admiral Goon and Dr. Kim had been listening for hours, but they knew the worst part of the story was still coming. When we left Terra Nova, we thought the war was over, Veltar said quietly. We had lost too many warriors. Our commanders wanted to return home and tell the council that humans were too dangerous to conquer. But that is not what happened? Dr. Kim asked. No. 3 days after we left Terra Nova, human ships appeared on our sensors. Not just a few ships, but hundreds of them. Admiral Goon leaned forward. The humans followed you? Yes, led by Admiral Tay and his fleet. But these were not the same kind of ships we had seen before. These were bigger, faster, and covered in weapons we did not recognize. Weapons you had never seen? Weapons that looked like ours but improved. Weapons that used our own technology but made better. Veltar looked up at them. In the 3 months we had been fighting on Terra Nova, humans had been building a fleet using our own designs. Dr. Kim stopped writing. How was that possible? Every piece of equipment we lost, every weapon we left behind, every ship that crashed, humans took it apart and learned from it. Then they made it work better. What did Admiral Tay want? At first we thought he wanted to attack our homeworld. Our fleet was damaged, low on supplies and far from help. It would have been the perfect time for humans to strike back. Veltar stood up and walked to the window. But when Admiral Tay contacted us, he did not demand surrender. He did not threaten to destroy us. He asked for a meeting. A meeting about what? Peace. He wanted to talk about ending the war. Veltar turned around. But the way he asked for this meeting was what made our commanders realize the truth. What truth? That humans had been ready to destroy us from the beginning. They had just chosen not to. Admiral Goon frowned. What do you mean? Admiral Tay showed us something during that meeting. Scan results of our homeworld. Detailed maps of our cities, our military bases, our population centers. Information that should have been impossible for humans to gather. How did they get that information? Spies. Human agents who had infiltrated our world months before the first battle. People who looked like other species but were actually humans in disguise. Dr. Kim looked up from her tablet. Humans can disguise themselves as other species. With surgery and training, yes. We found out later that humans had been preparing for this war long before we knew they existed. They had been watching us, learning about us, getting ready. Veltar sat back down. But that was not the most frightening part. The most frightening part was what Admiral Tay offered us. What did he offer? Peace, complete peace. No demands for territory. No requirements for payment, no punishment for our invasion. He just wanted us to agree to leave humans alone. That was all? That was all. But then he showed us why we should accept his offer. Veltar's voice got very quiet. Every ship in Admiral Tay's fleet was aimed at our homeworld. Every weapon was charged and ready to fire. If we had refused his offer, they could have destroyed our entire planet. But they did not? No. Ambassador Lee, who was with Admiral Tay, explained something to us. She said that humans had learned a long time ago that some victories cost too much. Dr. Kim put down her tablet. What did she mean? Humans had fought wars against each other where entire cities were destroyed. Wars where millions died. Wars that left both sides so damaged that no one really won. Nuclear wars? Yes, and others. Humans learned that winning a war by destroying everything was not really winning. It was just mutual destruction. Veltar looked at Admiral Goon. Ambassador Lee told us that humans could destroy our world, but they did not want to. She said that humans preferred to have neighbors, not empty planets. How did your commanders react? They were confused. In every war we had ever fought, the winner demanded something from the loser. Territory, resources, slaves, tribute. But humans wanted nothing except to be left alone. Did they accept the peace offer? Yes, but not because they wanted to. Because they were afraid. Veltar rubbed his forehead. Admiral Tay had proven that humans could reach our home world whenever they wanted. That meant nowhere in our territory was safe. What happened to your brother? Veltar was quiet for a long time. Zeknal could not accept what we had learned. He had been proud to be Velkari, proud to be a warrior of a superior species. Learning that humans had shown us mercy was worse than being defeated in battle. Why? Because it meant we had never been superior at all. Humans had been holding back during our entire war. They could have destroyed us from the beginning, but they chose to fight defensively instead. Dr. Kim leaned forward. What did your brother do? He took his own life 3 days after the peace treaty was signed. Left a message saying he could not live in a galaxy where the primitive species had chosen to spare us. The room was quiet, except for the soft hum of the ship's engines. Finally, Admiral Goon spoke. How do you feel about humans now? Terrified, Veltar said immediately. Not because of your weapons or your ships, but because of your mercy. Your mercy scares you? Yes, any species can be cruel. Any species can destroy their enemies, but only humans seem to understand that the real victory is convincing your enemies that they never want to fight you again. Veltar stood up and walked back to the window. Do you know what my people call humans now? What? The quiet death, because you fight wars so well that your enemies prefer to die rather than face you again. Dr. Kim picked up her tablet. Is that why you agreed to this interview? Partly, but also because I wanted to understand something. Veltar turned around. I wanted to know if humans realize what they are. What do you mean? Every other species in the galaxy fights wars to gain something. Territory, resources, power. But humans fight wars to end wars. You make conflict so terrible that no one wants to risk starting another one. Admiral Goon was quiet for a moment. Is that a bad thing? I do not know. But it is a frightening thing, because it means humans are not just good at war. You are good at peace too, and you use war to create peace. What will happen now? The Galactic Council has classified humans as a threat-level Omega species. Not because you are aggressive, but because you are too good at defending yourselves. Dr. Kim looked confused. What does that mean? It means other species will avoid human space. Not because they hate you, but because they are afraid of what you might become if you feel threatened again. Veltar walked back to the table and sat down. But I have a question for you, Admiral Goon. What question? In your wars against other humans, did you show the same mercy you showed us? Admiral Goon was quiet for a long time. The question hung in the air like a weight. Finally, he spoke. Not always. Why not? Because we knew other humans would fight back the same way we fought. We could not afford to hold back against an enemy who understood us as well as we understood them. Veltar nodded slowly. That is what I was afraid you would say. Why? Because it means humans are even more dangerous than we thought. You only showed us mercy because you knew we could not truly threaten you, but against an enemy who could match your abilities, Veltar shook his head. I am glad there is only one human species in the galaxy. Dr. Kim closed her tablet. Is there anything else you want to tell us? Yes, one last thing. Veltar looked directly at Admiral Goon. The war changed my people. We used to be proud warriors, confident in our strength. Now we are afraid, not just of humans, but of war itself. Because you lost? No, because we learned what war really costs. Humans taught us that some victories are not worth winning, and some enemies are too dangerous to make. Veltar stood up, preparing to leave. My people will never attack humans again. Not because we cannot win, but because we are afraid of what we might unleash if we lose them. What do you mean? We are afraid that if we hurt humans badly enough, you might stop showing mercy. And if humans ever fight a war without mercy... Veltar paused at the door. I hope the galaxy never has to see what that would look like. The door closed behind him, leaving Admiral Goon and Dr. Kim alone with the weight of what they had heard. Outside the window, stars twinkled in the darkness, peaceful and distant. But both humans now understood that this peace existed only because their species had chosen to make it so. And that choice, they realized, was more terrifying than any weapon they could ever build.